Let us observe a moment's silence to mourn the passing of a conscientious leader who changed the world.
Good evening, I'm Adushka Balasuriya.
And I'm Sonali Vanika.
You're watching Primetime News live from the Newsfirst studios here in Colombo on this sobering Friday.
Well, there has been an outpouring of grief and messages of condolence from around the world following the passing of South African anti-apartheid hero Nelson Mandela.
Yes, now we have a comprehensive report on the life of Madiba coming up on the news later tonight. But first, a look at your headlines.
The headlines on Newsfirst at 9.
The world mourns the passing of Nelson Mandela. 37 injured in a collision involving 2 buses in Bayangura. Anand Guruge adjudged Volunteer of the Year at V Awards 2013. Rough seas around the island, warning issued to the fishing community.
Newsfirst at 9.
South Africa and the world at large have been mourning the death of an inspirational leader who has touched the conscience of many.
Yes, a freedom fighter, a prisoner, a moral compass to a nation and to the world. The first black president of a democratic South Africa, Nelson Mandela, passed away yesterday.
Mandela passed away at his home in Johannesburg at around 9 p.m. South African time at the age of 95.
The anti-apartheid revolutionary, who spent 27 years in prison, led South Africa to democracy and became the country's first black president. Nelson Mandela is revered around the world as an icon of peace, freedom, reconciliation, and triumph over racial segregation. Mandela had been battling health issues in recent years, including a recurring lung infection that led to numerous hospitalizations. Despite rare public appearances, he had a special place in the hearts of the people of the nation and the world. In a statement on South African national TV, South African President Jacob Zuma said Mr. Mandela had departed and was at peace.
Our nation has lost its greatest son. Our people have lost a father. Although we knew that this day would come, nothing can diminish our sense of a profound, enduring loss. His tireless struggle for freedom earned him the respect of the world. His humility, his compassion, and his humanity earned him their love.
In an outpouring of emotion, mourners who gathered at several key locations in South Africa carried pictures of Mandela and sang songs from the time of Mandela's struggle against white minority in South Africa in the 1900s. Even though his passing was anticipated, ordinary South Africans felt a sense of shock that Mandela was no longer with them.
For me it was like a massive shock, and I can't believe this has happened. Like, I didn't believe it when I heard it. It's really hectic.
I don't know how to react to it because we were all expecting it, but not this soon though.
And I think it's a very sad time, but also a time of a possible renaissance or a rebirth.
President Jacob Zuma said Mandela, who is affectionately known by his clan name Madiba, would receive a full state funeral next Sunday and flags will be flown at half-mast. Official flags in countries around the world, including the White House in Washington and 10 Downing Street in London, were ordered at half-mast.
The President's office, as you are aware, the announcement made by President Zuma, he did say that this was a state funeral. So the presidency, the office of the President in South Africa, will in the course of the next few hours be releasing the official program in terms of what happens where in South Africa and when. The program has been constructed in such a way that everybody will have an opportunity to pay their last respects before the final burial at his traditional home in Kruger.
Though Nelson Mandela was in power for only 5 years, from 1994 to 1999, he was a figure of enormous moral influence the world over.
Now, Nelson Mandela lived a full life, enhancing the freedom of not only the people of South Africa, but of people across the world.
That's right. Here's looking back at the life and times of Madiba.
Born on the 18th of July 1918 to the Thembu royal family of the Xhosa clan, Nelson Mandela was a product of Fort Hare University and the University of Witwatersrand, where he studied law. Living in Johannesburg, he became involved in anti-colonial politics, joining the African National Congress and becoming a founding member of its youth league. After the Afrikaner Nationalists of South Africa's National Party came into power in 1948 and began implementing the policy of apartheid, Mandela rose to prominence in the ANC's 1952 Defiance campaign, was elected president of the Transvaal ANC branch and oversaw the 1955 Congress of the People. Working as a lawyer, Mandela was repeatedly arrested on trumped-up charges of seditious activities and with the ANC leadership was prosecuted in the treason trial from 1956 to 1961 but was found not guilty. Although initially committed to non-violent protests in association with the South African Communist Party, he co-founded the militant Ukhonto We Isizwe group in 1961, leading a bombing campaign against apartheid government targets. In 1962, he was arrested, convicted of sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government and sentenced to imprisonment. An international campaign lobbied for his freedom and he was released in 1990 after 27 years, with South Africa on the threshold of becoming the Rainbow Nation. Becoming ANC president, Mandela led negotiations with South African President F.W. de Klerk to abolish apartheid and establish multiracial elections in 1994, in which he led the ANC to victory. He was elected president and formed a government of national unity. As president, Mandela established a new constitution and initiated the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to investigate human rights abuses of the apartheid era while introducing policies to encourage land reform, combat poverty and expand healthcare services. Internationally, Mandela became an icon to many and he was responsible for the formation of the group The Elders, which comprised of other famous personalities including Bishop Desmond Tutu and former Irish President Mary Robinson. He has been lauded by many nations and has received over 250 awards, including the 1993 Nobel Peace Prize. Given his political commitments, Mandela had a far from smooth family life. But Madiba, as he is fondly known among South Africans, made an entire nation his family and changed the global political landscape for generations to come, leaving an unerasable impression on this world.
Meanwhile, President Mahinda Rajapaksa has written to South African President Jacob Zuma expressing his condolences on the death of former South African President Nelson Mandela.
In his letter, President Rajapaksa said on behalf of the Commonwealth and its share of its office, he expressed his sympathies to the President, government and the people of South Africa, and in particular the family members of the founding father of modern South Africa. The President noted that the Commonwealth was enriched with the return of South Africa to its fold in 1994 under the leadership of the late Nelson Mandela, who represented the highest values of human dignity and statesmanship. President Rajapaksa further noted that the highest tribute that we in the Commonwealth can pay to the great statesman is to preserve the values of democracy, diversity and unity.
Nelson Mandela's message of reconciliation and not vengeance inspired the world, and once the news of his passing broke, messages and tributes started pouring in from state leaders and key figures.
I'm one of the countless millions who drew inspiration from Nelson Mandela's life. I would study his words and his writings. The day he was released from prison gave me a sense of what human beings can do when they're guided by their hopes and not by their fears.
Tonight, one of the brightest lights of our world has gone out. Nelson Mandela was not just a hero of our time, but a hero of all time.
Nelson Mandela was one of the great figures of Africa, arguably one of the great figures of the last century. He was the father of modern South Africa.
Mr. Mandela, a well-respected figure by people across the world, passed away. We are in deep sorrow. The Chinese government and people send our deepest regrets and condolences to the government and people of South Africa.
He represented the conscience of the world. In a world marked by division, his was an example of working for reconciliation and harmony, and we are not likely to see another of his kind for a long time to come.
United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said many around the world were greatly influenced by Mandela's selfless struggle for human dignity, equality and freedom. Ban Ki-moon said Mandela touched people's lives in deeply personal ways. The United Nations Security Council also observed a minute's silence in New York in honor of Nelson Mandela.
God, thank you for the gift of Madiba. Thank you for what he has enabled us to know we can become.
Great, I think, peacemaker. I think a very practical, and I think a determined leader.
Meanwhile, issuing a communique, UMP MP Sajid Premadasa said that Mandela was a friend to Sri Lanka, and his attempts to build a close relationship with Sri Lanka during the time of his term as president can never be forgotten. The communique reads that there are many lessons that today's politicians can learn from Nelson Mandela. He also said in the communique that the passing away of such a prominent figure who was the epitome of an exemplary human being for the generations of the 20th and 21st century has brought great sorrow.
The announcement of the news of the demise of Nelson Mandela on our website www.newsfirst.lk, tributes flooded in. Here's a look at some of them.